Well, you were supposed to take the child and give them a different book. Why did you let me check out this book? We are going to have a conversation about this now, aren't we? And canceled by the Germans.
What is the title of this book? In astronomy? Does that sound like something that was written by Mercer Mayer? No, it does not.
Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I am very, very, very much Justin.
You're very... it's not on the list. We can't replace it with anything.
It's not on the list. What list could you possibly be talking about?
Well, you sent me an image of a very stupid list the other day.
Which we could probably put on the thumbnail. Now that I'm
we can set that up. And you know, it's one of those things where people believe that there's a wrong way to write certain things and a right way to write certain things, and then they make these proscriptions that are very, let's say, pigeonholed. And so you sent me a list where on the left half of the list there's a bunch of adjectives that are preceded by the word very. And there's a little red X next to each one of these. And then on the right side, there's a column of associated, quote-unquote, better adjectives with green check marks next to them. And this is one of those things that I don't know. It's irritating when people get way too proscriptive about how writing needs to be done. You know, the same people that say no adverbs. The same people that say, don't describe your characters. Like, there's a bunch of weird, stupid advice you can get out there that taken...
Do people say not to describe their characters?
Yes.
What? Okay, so there are writing styles in which sometimes you just don't describe your characters. Like, a lot of detective stories will not describe the detective in lieu of getting on with telling the part of the story that matters. Like, I don't think there was very much description of the characters in the Dodecagon house murders.
Mm-hmm.
But, I read it years ago. I could be wrong on this, but I have read detective stories where some of them will only describe the detective. They won't really describe the characters. They'll just talk about their traits that are relevant to the case that's being worked on.
Sure.
But as an overall rule to not describe your characters, there's a lot that would go missing from a lot of stories if you didn't do that. I mean, Terry Pratchett's books, without the amazing descriptions that he gives for some of his characters, such as Gaspode the dog, Granny Weatherwax, and Rincewind, who wears a hat that has wizard on it, that he clearly put on the hat, and it's got 2 Z's in wizard, and one of them is probably backwards.
Yeah.
These are things that, depending on what kind of story you're writing, they add to the fantastic nature of it.
Sure.
Or they give you a clearer picture of what kind of person you might be. Like, imagine if you had no image in your head of James Bond that you were supposed to work with, and there was nothing to really evoke the suave style of an international man of mystery.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
just, the don't describe your characters is probably the worst example I've heard, but I have heard it. Like,
that's a pretty bad one.
It's really bad. But this is a little bit less horrifying, because generally speaking, you do want to be descriptive and you do want to use the right words for things. But at the same time, to call using the word very in any situation wrong is a bit of an overstep. You know, when you showed me this list the first time, I immediately went over to a book of Shakespeare plays that I have a PDF of, and it was like, I wonder if Shakespeare ever used the word very. It turns out Shakespeare used the word very often. So, you know,
He used the word very, very often.
Not very often, but often.
I don't know, that was what? That was just one thing you read that had like 20 instances of it.
Well, some of those instances were like the word very as part of like every or other bigger words. So, you know, but like at the same time, you know, there are reasons of like the way something sounds that you might want to use the word very with another adjective following it rather than a different word that has a different number of syllables or is accented differently. There, you know, Shakespeare wrote often in like a iambic pentameter. And so there's sometimes where you need those syllables set up in the way. Well, not necessarily filler words, but you need to play around with the different ways to say a certain specific thing in order to maintain meter, right? Like that's a thing.
In terms of poetry, we can call them filler words because you do want to match that. So there's definitely that aspect of it where it's like, I'm going to use very here because that will fill in
because it scans. Because I'm gonna say very noisy instead of deafening because very noisy scans and deafening does not.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that,
and like there's a bunch of other reasons why you would use the word very. Like for instance in dialogue, right? Yeah. You could have an uneducated person, an uneducated character, and their dialogue is not going to be pulling these 7-syllable adjectives out from nowhere. They're going to say something was very big, or something was very angry, or something was very funny. They're not going to come up with the words, you know, hilarious, deafening, furious, whatever, because it would be in conflict with the character to do that.
Yeah. And this actually puts this entire list under the heading of bad advice for beginners.
Yeah.
Because you put it in someone's head that these are no-nos, when in fact this is like, it's almost a guideline. We'll get into why this isn't even a guideline in a minute, but
well, we can even go further, right? Like if you take this list verbatim, you're going to spend a lot of time with your nose in a thesaurus on your first draft. Because
you're
going to write very blah, and then you're going to be like, oh, I can't do that. I have to stop and fix that, you know, right now. Because that's a rule.
Yeah, you'll turn beginner writers into thesaurus. What's the word? It's little thesaurus piggies with their nose in the thesaurus all the time.
Yeah.
I think we can take that first example though, and we can look at the problem that is immediately presented. We have an X next to the term very noisy.
Yes.
And then we have a green check mark next to the word deafening, implying that is the word you should use in lieu of using very noisy.
Right.
However, as you and I both know,
right,
these two things are not equivalencies.
Correct.
And something can be very noisy.
Can be very noisy, but cacophonous can be another way that things are very noisy, and these are not equivalent terms.
Yeah, I mean, loud can mean very noisy.
Sure. Well, no, but I guess my point is that you can have noisy meaning loud or noisy meaning jumbled, right?
Yeah.
The room was very noisy, and so I couldn't hear him, versus the room was very noisy, and so I couldn't understand him, right? Because there's too much background noise confusing things.
Yeah.
And so the red X's are somewhat objectionable, but also the check marks are a little bit irritating too, because on this particular list, there's a lot of them where the person who made this list is using one specific definition of very noisy and ignoring all the others.
Yeah. I think, wasn't there even one that didn't make sense? Let's see. It was on here somewhere. Very perfect. Very perfect is
stupid.
The fifth one down. Nobody, I don't know of anyone who has ever said very perfect. Perfect is not, it's like you said, there's no slider for perfect.
No, perfect is not a sliding scale, so if something is perfect, it's perfect. And you can use the word flawless to define something that was perfect, but you can't make it more perfect than perfect.
Yeah, and this list is giving flawless as an equivalent to very perfect, when in fact flawless is just an equivalent to perfect.
Right.
And it's not even a perfect equivalent. Like, it can mean perfect, but it can also be like, depending on the extreme you want to take the word perfect to, a flawless gem.
Yeah, a flawless gem. I was going to use that exact example, right? Like, people don't say perfect gem very often, but they will say a flawless gem because the quality of a gem has multiple different sliding scales, and the fact that the gem has no flaws doesn't mean that it couldn't be, say, bigger, because a bigger gem would be more perfect, right? It'd be better than a smaller gem, even if assuming both are flawless.
Yes, whereas the gem could be flawless. If it was bigger, it would be very perfect.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
And you know, some of them were just pointing out to be funny, because obviously the person that made the list couldn't put every definition of every word in here, but some of it is
that's the thing, though, right? Is that's why this list is irritating, because it's not that it just says, you know, hey, if you want to say very noisy, there are other words that are better than that, and two possible would be deafening or cacophonous, right? It's saying get rid of very noisy, you know, Drake look away. Deafening, Drake give thumbs up or something. I don't know.
And it's just a whole list that, you know, we can start to go through it, I suppose. So very noisy, of course, was deafening.
Right,
the next example is very often, and the equivalency of that is given as frequently, which
frequently and very often are,
they're not actually, those aren't actually good words to replace each other with. Frequently implies an intermittent regularity more than very often does, for a start.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, often and very often are two different things from, like, often just means this is something that will reoccur regularly. Saying something is very
not even
often,
regularly, but just commonly.
Yeah, and saying something is very often, it just merely implies that the frequency in which it occurs...
That the intervals between these occurrences are smaller, but may still differ.
Yeah, whereas frequency, frequency as used in engineering...
Well, frequently is a little different from frequency, but I get where you're going.
Yeah. So frequently has a slightly different implication, but it can be used in that sense. So the second one on the list wasn't too offensive, but it's important to just look at it, because if you're looking at this list as some kind of guide, you have to be thinking to yourself, what's the real purpose of what you're doing? You are trying to take something that you have written down and say, can I word it better and make it something that is a little more enjoyable to read? And if you were to use guides like this, like let's say you had 50 different guides that were things such as this, like, use this word instead of this word. Can you imagine what someone's writing would sound like when it came out? It would read like an AI for a start.
Sure. Well, but I guess the point that I'm at pains to hammer home is that if you're going to use a thesaurus, you should do so consciously, and not just like, oh, I use the word very often. I type in often into a thesaurus, and then I pick a random word that the thesaurus hands me. Right? Like that's the bad way to use a thesaurus, because you can mess up connotations that way. Right? Whereas what you need to do is you need to know the individual meanings of all these other, synonyms or related words to often or old, and you need to say, I mean this old. Well, what word best approximates that? Because ancient is different. The next one on the list is very old to ancient, and some very old things are ancient, but not all ancient things. Not all very old things are ancient.
Yeah,
all ancient
things are very old, but
yeah.
So for anyone that took a philosophy or logic class, this is where you use this knowledge,
right?
Even though it should kind of be a little bit of common sense, but I can understand where public education system may have failed some people.
The kind of person that would create a list like this, or the kind of person that would follow a list like this, are lacking in common sense.
They're the kind of person that would need that philosophy or logic class,
right?
They need all the modus in their Tolans, which, God forbid anyone ask me to actually remember what that means.
I'm sure I don't know.
So we have so like what's a good example here? Like we could say that a turtle that is 100 years old is a very old turtle.
Mm-hmm.
But comparatively to a tree that's 4,000 years old, the tree might be ancient. The turtle is not.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Elderly,
then,
or
yeah.
there's lots of different synonyms for very old, and ancient is not the only one. And there's a gradation of connotations based on which one in particular you choose.
And sometimes it's all about how you want it to sound.
Sure.
Sometimes
Well,
you might
yeah, we've
want...
already said, like, I mean, the "it needs to scan" thing is not only related to poetry or things that are
Yeah.
written in poetic meter. Because it can sound better. You can see a sentence and say, oh, here's ancient and here's very old. Which one sounds better in this particular sentence?
And that brings us to our next example, because sometimes you'll read that sentence and it'll just be very painful to the eyes.
Sure.
It'll be excruciating to the voice in your head as you read it. And thus we have very painful and excruciating. Now,
Well,
this one
yeah.
one might be a little better of an example to use, but very painful can be like a constant throbbing in the knee that is just it's an annoyance that you have to put up with it and you don't want to stand on it. Whereas excruciating is like, it can be the kind of pain where it's like, I'm being tortured by someone.
Right.
We're being waterboarded here by the CIA. I guess waterboarding wouldn't be so much excruciating as a desperate situation, but
Yeah.
let's say someone's sticking nails under your under your
fingernails.
thumbs, or under your fingernails, needles under your fingernails. That would be pretty
Sticking anything under your fingernails is usually pretty excruciating.
Yeah. So again, it's like we get what the person who made it is trying to do, and it's not a case of this. There's not something to be taken from this, but in its entirety, it is, first off, way too extensive of a list to try and get the point across.
Right.
Second off, it's bad advice for new writers, and third, it's painful to think that this is advice that was probably posted on Twitter by a writer.
Yeah.
Who very likely is... I don't want to say I wouldn't buy books from someone who posted this, because that's a little unfair, because sometimes you're just like having fun and you just see something that's you think it's kind of funny and you post it.
Yeah, sure.
But this is not advice that I as a writer would hand off to someone.
Well, the problem, of course, is that the people who are novice writers are the ones most likely to fall into the trap of this kind of quote-unquote advice.
Yeah, so they might be the ones to repost it. It could very well have been a novice writer that posted this.
Or repost it or follow it, either or.
And keep in mind that there's also a sliding scale for what I'm saying about novice writers. For instance, like, anyone would look at the fact that I don't have that many books published and nobody knows who I am and consider me a novice writer. But I've been writing for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, so there might be someone who's sold several thousand books in the past week on Twitter and is a brand new writer and hasn't really honed their craft that much. And I would be able to look from my perspective at them and be like, yeah, that's a novice writer. And that could very well be the kind of person that posted this nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's important not to get caught up in anyone's personal hype when you're taking advice, is kind of the point I want to make here. Just because someone has a book published on a shelf does not... Like, I wouldn't want to take punctuation advice from Stephen King, for instance.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's argument from authority. Or it's argument from popularity. Those are both fallacies.
Yeah, the man's never seen a comma that he wouldn't torture into excruciating pain. We did very perfect.
Yeah.
That's probably the funniest one on the list overall.
Yeah. So very poor is the next thing on the list. What can we say about that?
Well, very poor can imply that, it can imply anything from the level of not having enough to you're barely scraping by, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe even living in squalor, or it can even mean, living on the street and not having anything, or just like, it could even push the boundaries of like, you're on the verge of death because you have no wealth to your name.
It could also mean...
generally...
Yeah, it could also mean, like, very low quality.
Yeah, there's that too. I'm looking at the let's scan it with the word that it has
Sure.
next to it first, and then we'll get to that.
Yeah. So the attached word is destitute. Yeah.
Yes. And destitute, very poor and destitute can mean the same thing, but destitute is generally an extreme in which, very poor has a much larger, again, sliding scale in this sense than destitute does. Destitute can also have multiple meanings, just like the word poor,
Right.
where it's like you don't have money, or you don't have food, or you don't have clothing, or you don't have... You could be destitute of intelligence and not be a very smart person.
Sure.
You can use it in that sense. And poor can be used in a lot of senses in the same way.
Right,
like
right.
you said, a poor quality thing, a poor person, a poor excuse. It could be used in the sense of bad.
He was a very poor runner.
Yeah. Poor for unskilled, bad, and
he was a
not
destitute
wealthy.
runner.
Yeah, a destitute runner. So yeah, that's where it starts to get funny, where we're like, imagine a novice writer in this world of, AI and easy access to everything, and it's like, I'm going to write a book. Oh, this must be the way. A younger person can convince themselves pretty easily that the way that the professionals do it is to take the easy route, which is usually never the case.
Yeah.
Or if it is, it's like, it's very obvious. So they may think to themselves, all right, so I can just type in very poor into
Control
my...
F, Control... Yeah.
Yeah. And replace it with destitute. And then you start to run into these definition problems where you might have a destitute runner in your story.
Well, there's also the problem of, like, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we go to a thesaurus is to use different words for things, right? And so if your perspective is, I'm going to take every time I use... Let's say that you had a word where it was actually a pretty good equivalent. That, like, very, very painful is pretty close to excruciating. Let's say that, just for the sake of argument. If you might find that there's a place where you say very painful 3 times in one paragraph. And, it might not suit you to replace all 3 of those with excruciating, but rather to replace one with excruciating, one with throbbing,
torturous,
and one with very painful, right? Like, to keep things different for the reader, because generally speaking, monotony tends to turn readers off. The same thing happening over and over and over again. You have the rule of 3s because that's usually the number of times you can get away with repeating yourself before people start to find it jarring.
Except with music. Because if you've got a good chorus, then you got to kind of stick with that. Even then,
sometimes
usually a third chorus will change, or sometimes the second chorus will have like a one line that's different.
Yeah, that's very common.
But there are times when you do have to break the rule of 3.
Usually, if we're talking about, like, songs that show up on the radio to show ourselves as old people, usually those songs limit themselves to 3 occurrences of the chorus anyway.
Yeah.
It'll be verse, chorus, bridge, verse.
Yeah. So
something
it's,
like that.
There's a tempo to almost every type of writing. I mean, there's a tempo to every type of writing that there is. It's when people try to... There's always this tendency, and again, I don't blame younger people for this. I say it's a result of being young and not having had much experience.
Sure.
There's this tendency to want to break every rule just to show that you're being different, and experience will teach you that is not necessary to be different and unique.
Well, there are some rules that are there for a good reason.
Yeah.
By breaking those rules, you make your story into an incoherent mess.
Spelling rules are a pretty big one. You kind of want to stick with that. There's even cases where you
spelling
can break...
outside of dialect. Like that's the one place where you get to fiddle with spelling is in dialect.
There's a couple of other ways to do it, but we don't have to get into it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, let's just say that Terry Pratchett was pretty good at it, using him as an example again.
Oh, sure, for the purposes of puns and things like that is another good way to use spelling changes. But they have to be good puns.
Yeah, they do. You don't just want to not spell things right and call it a day. You've got to have a reason for it. A
Right.
compelling reason, if you will.
Sure.
Or should I say a very powerful reason? Moving
I mean,
on
if
to
you
our
want.
next list item.
This one's pretty bad.
This one was one of my favorites because as soon as I read that, as soon as I saw "don't use very powerful, use compelling," the first thought in my head was, well, it looks like I'm going to have a compelling sorceress in my next story.
Yeah. Well, he was hit.
I mean-
He was hit with a compelling punch.
Yeah, the boxing one that you used as an example when we were talking about it last time.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I think this one on its face is pretty obvious to just about anyone.
I should hope so.
Maybe not the person that.
But this is one of the ones where if you just use this list, this is one of the ones where if you just use this list as is, you would come up with the most problems probably with this one.
Yeah, it's hard to find a compelling wrench at your local Home Depot.
Well, a compelling torque wrench.
Or a pneumatic ratchet.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad one.
Yeah, so I don't know. Is there anything else we want to say about the compelling case for very powerful?
This particular use of very powerful, or this particular use of compelling, seems to be aimed specifically at one particular word to follow powerful in very powerful, right? Like a very powerful argument is that's the only time that you would make that substitution. Not only, but that's like one of the few times you would make that particular substitutions. There's way more generic words for very powerful than compelling. And by generic, I mean like applicable to multiple situations. Because you can also make like very powerful could be replaced by hard hitting, and hard hitting would work for a punch or an argument. That's my point.
And it's, I guess we can also just real quick mention that compelling and very powerful are not exactly things that need to be compared here, because something that's powerful can also be compelling. It doesn't have to be very powerful.
Sure.
So this is a use case where maybe the red X you want in this particular use of very powerful is right over the very. Maybe all you need to write is powerful.
That could be too, yeah.
But so, very exists to
accentuate. That's the purpose.
Yeah, it does exist to accentuate that. And I don't think that we necessarily, because you can also say very compelling is kind of where I'm going with this.
Sure.
So it wouldn't really change much to compare powerful and compelling when you can also compare very powerful and very compelling.
Right.
And accentuation is not a useless thing, despite what any midwit author might tell you.
Yeah.
We're coming up on some good ones here. We've got very quick.
Yeah. So rapid is not... This is another problem where very quick could mean moving quickly, or it could mean occurring with a very small interval between them, right? So rapid is better than compelling for very powerful, because rapid at least applies to both of those cases, but at the same time, I don't know. Nobody gets into a boat and rides the very quicks.
No, they don't. And maybe we're being a little facetious here, but we are driving the point. We're making we're being very facetious, but we're making a point here that one of the things that can make someone a better writer is to actually think about what they're doing with the words.
Yeah.
Very quick and rapid. Rapid doesn't necessarily, like you said, it can be another matter of like where you have very often and frequently.
Yeah.
Quick can just mean the movement of a single thing, whereas rapid can be the diminishing width of a waveform to give it increased rapidity, which can imply quickness, but wouldn't be used in the same way as you would for, I don't know, you can make the case where a runner can be running rapidly because they're anything using a circular motion like that, but then we're just getting into, we're getting very semantic with that one.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, there's the case of very quick and rapid wouldn't work with, if you were talking about rapids. You would have a boat moving very quickly through the rapids, but you wouldn't necessarily want to say that it's moving rapidly. Well, you wouldn't want to say that the boat was
moving rapidly through the rapids.
Right. Unless you were going for alliteration. Which,
alliteration could be a reason to do that, but yeah.
And again, very quick and quick don't necessarily discount each other.
Sure.
Quick and rapid can be used interchangeably in some cases.
So there's another thing that this example makes me think of, and that's that why so much anger about the word very when there are lots of other words that mean the same thing as very, just to different degrees perhaps, like extremely. Should we never use the word extremely because there might be a better word than, extremely painful or something like that? Well, I would say no. Like the point is to use a variety of words and not to repeat the same thing over and over again. Depending on what you're trying to do, but like I think that part of the reason that all these varies are getting X's is because very is a quote unquote simple word, right? And like a lot of people want to quote unquote elevate their writing by using words with a larger number of letters and or syllables. And that's another thing that you might want to consider resisting sometimes, because you can write something and it can have a lot of these, really nice specific words, and you can discover that what you've written uses such a large vocabulary that the vast majority of people who might read it can't read it and comprehend it, which is a problem that we've had here, particularly in the US, as reading levels have decayed over the years. I just saw a video recently about, like, people are calling it a literacy crisis at this point because people are so frequently not reading at all once they leave school. Their actual ability to read is decreasing as they age. And the people who are in school are reading below the quote-unquote appropriate level for their age/grade level. So, I mean, I've written things before where I thought, oh, this is a good paragraph. And one thing I've done sometimes is I've gone and I've taken a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs and thrown it into one of those devices that measures like the grade level of the reading. And, like sometimes I'll write something and it'll come out as like 14th grade. I'm like, oh, I should probably simplify this a little bit.
I like that you've actually gone and done that to test it out.
Yeah.
I am not a big fan of lowering the level of writing that I do for the sake of...
Well, I mean, it depends on what your audience is, right?
Yeah,
The problem is that the more difficult you make your writing, the smaller your audience will inevitably be. And if you're writing for someone else's publication, you need to match your writing level to the writing level of existing articles in that publication. With a little bit of, not match, but like get it close. You know what I mean?
And this is entirely true. One of the first times I tried to get a story published, I got a letter back from the magazine, and all they wrote was, "Yeah, we like it, but we're not going to take this at this time because we're essentially competing for people's beer money here."
Right.
I'll never forget that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've got it saved in a file somewhere if I can dig it out. But it was back before I had decided to make the Racken into an entire book, and the only story that I was trying to publish just Morelius capsizing the first chapter in a science magazine, and they did. They sent me a letter back that said, "Thank you for your submission, yada yada. We're really just competing for people's beer money here."
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I mean, I didn't think it was highbrow or anything, and. But you're right.
Narrator,
No,
it was not.
No, it wasn't. It really wasn't. The funny thing about it is that this is kind of. I mean, it really is a crisis in more of like the educational sense than anything, because it's not that people just aren't reading; it's that people aren't aware of how to read at this point.
Yeah.
My nephew just yesterday was talking to me about stuff he was doing in school. And I asked him about his science class because now, okay, so I'm going to ask you because you're close to my age, so it probably was the same for you. How many oceans are there?
I mean, it depends on whether you consider the Arctic Ocean to be a separate ocean, because it is contiguous with both the Atlantic and the Pacific.
Oh, how many did we learn about?
The ones that come to mind for me are Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic.
Yes, and
Am I
that is
missing
what I
any?
remember. No, well, okay, so here's the thing. That is what I remembered. And
Yeah.
so my mom was asking my nephew some questions because he's got a test coming up. And so she was
Mhm.
like, well, how many oceans? He was like, name the oceans and how many are there? And he says, I think, the conversation basically went that he said 5. And then he tried to name them and he got the 4 that I was like, yeah, those are the 4. There's not 5. And then my mom looks it up on her phone and says, oh, yeah, there's 5. And I'm like, so I pull out my phone and I start looking up, were there always 5 oceans? Because apparently at some point between the time I was in school and now, they added a 5th ocean called the Southern Ocean to the
What?
list.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a Southern Ocean because my mom names them off and says Southern Ocean. I'm like, no, there was
There
the
was never a
Indian
Southern Ocean in
Yeah.
in my primary or secondary schooling.
I don't know why they did that. I don't know why. I feel like there was a scientist that just didn't have much work to do one day and was just like, I'm just going to say I'm just going to come up with another ocean and we're going to put this in textbooks. I don't understand the purpose of it, but there's 5 oceans now. So
Okay.
whatever. Are there 8 continents now? I don't know. But the point is that was actually just a distraction. The point is I asked him about his science class. He goes, well, we don't have science class. We have we have gym for an hour and we have, I don't know. There was something that was like a 20-minute part of the day.
Mhm.
Library was 20 minutes. So,
Okay.
we're already off to a good start here. Then he said that 1 hour of their day is STEM. And I'm like, wait a minute. STEM, just the terminology, just the acronym STEM is already 4 different subjects, each of which can be broken down into a multitude of subjects. So
Yeah.
you're telling me that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics have all been boiled into 1 hour for students. So there's not like
no.
they don't do math as
Oh,
math.
no.
They do it as part of STEM. And then they're also apparently learning engineering, but it's like combined with the math, which means that they're relating all of this together, which means that you're not getting any precision learning out of this, which kind of explains why everyone I run into can't tell me how to do anything anymore. But like, where does technology fit into there? What do they spend the hour on where they're explaining?
Okay, so when I was in high school, I would have, let's see, I mean, like, I had classes that were individual hours. I think I had 1 hour of math for at least 1 hour of math for every semester.
Yeah.
From 9th grade through 12th grade. I had algebra. I had geometry. I had pre-calculus. I had calculus, and I had AP calculus, or something like that. There was algebra 2 as well. Like these were all classes where they were either going to be 1 semester or 2 semester classes, and they would take up an hour a day every single day. And then I had at least an hour of science classes because I took. There was earth sciences in 9th grade. Then there was biology. Then there was chemistry. Then there was physics. Then there was AP chemistry, and then there was AP biology. And AP chemistry and AP biology, I believe, were full year classes. And then I also took drafting for 3 years. So I had 6 semesters of 1 hour a day of drafting, which I guess would be engineering, and possibly some technology.
Yeah.
So,
but that's the point, though, is we can
I
combine.
guess my point is that generally speaking, for let's say 3 of the 4 years of my time in high school, I had at least 3, and usually more like 4 hours of quote unquote STEM instruction every single day.
Yeah, and to be fair, my nephew is still in elementary school, but like look at the time scale.
Well, I still had that in elementary school.
Yeah,
Like
that's
there was an hour for math, and there was an hour for
science,
and there was usually an hour for something, like computers or something like that.
Yeah. But now that's all one thing, and so you can't get very specific with all of those things in 1 hour. And not only
Right.
that, but look at how that time scale is working. So you're telling me that all of that is being crammed into 1 hour, giving you the same length of time to study it as the 1 hour of gym they have. So
Mhm.
1 hour of running around kicking a ball, and also 1 hour of everything there is to know on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I mean, we had multiple textbooks for all those subjects.
Sure.
Whereas, what do they have? Do they have a STEM textbook where it's just like, all right, chapter 1, we're going to we're going to look at how a battery works, and we're going to do some math formulas with it, and then we're going to show you how to do a CAD drawing of.
I mean, I was one of the last years before they started doing that horrible, what did they call it? The
Common Core math.
Common Core math. Yeah, that was horrible, and I just barely escaped it.
Yeah, that was the most atrocious math on the face of the planet, and I've explained
it was very
to several,
atrocious.
Yeah, I've explained to a lot of people why they tried to design it the way that they did, and it's not. I don't know if it's someone doing it on purpose or if this is just people who are kind of smart, but aren't smart enough to realize that just because they're smart, they know how to make other people smart as well. Because all Common Core is, in its most basic form, is a bunch of people who are good at math saying, these are the tricks I use in my head so that I can understand the math I'm using. So instead of teaching people how to do the math, I'll teach them the tricks, and therefore they will be able to do the math the way I do it, which will make them smart. But then they teach the tricks. The people that learn it have no context for what it is they're doing, why it works, and what the point of it is, and therefore it never makes sense to them. Because when I watch these weird videos that people do where it's like, look at this Common Core problem, look at how they're doing this, I understand how they're doing it, because I use those same tricks in my head sometimes. But this is not a way to teach people. You cannot teach people how to do math with these tricks.
Well, you don't end up teaching them math, you end up teaching them tricks.
Yeah. So,
and
so
tricks
they
tricks
never
are
learn.
What you use when you... Tricks has two implications. Number one, a trick is something that you teach a dog to reproduce.
Yeah.
An action. And that there's some of that, I think. But also, a trick is what an expert who understands a complicated problem uses to simplify a complicated problem in order to make it easier to solve, or to solve it in less time, right? And so you need to understand what kind of problems you're solving and why and how and all that good stuff before you start learning tricks. You know, it would do me no good to understand the trick of a Fourier transform or a Laplace transform without knowing what kind of problems I'm trying to solve and why, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, these are all... I mean...
This is a case where tricks are definitely not for kids. You want them to know the math.
Right. And of course, some things you can't teach in the form of tricks, like geometry is not about tricks. Geometry is about understanding how a Euclidean plane works. And like you can teach a person a trick to like calculate the circumference of a circle from its diameter, but that doesn't give them any notion of why these two things are related.
Right.
You learn that later. If you're like in calculus and you say, well, I want to calculate the diameter of a circle using calculus, you can then get it from first principles. But like one of the problems that we had in physics that was solved in like AP physics was that AP physics used calculus. And so that means that the number of memorized equations drops drastically, right? If you're doing non-algebraic or non-calculus physics, algebra only, and you want to do ballistic movement, you need to memorize 6 or 7 different equations based on what your knowns are and what your unknowns are. But if you know calculus, you just take an integral or derivative as appropriate, and you derive those equations without having to memorize them.
Yeah.
So like this is what ends up happening is that when you teach someone a bundle of tricks, they rely more on memorization as well rather than like a thorough understanding of the subject matter.
Yeah, and this is kind of a problem that we have here with this very example of this list. It's trying to teach someone a trick without giving any understanding of what's being done here.
Right. Because, yeah, exactly. If you use this list without thinking about it, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah. And, just jumping back real quick, because I know we got distracted, but ultimately the main point I wanted to make was that whole thing where it's like, there's these 6 different classes that my nephew takes throughout the day. 20 minutes is allotted to the library. What can you do
Yeah.
at a library in 20 minutes? You got to run in, grab a book, and start reading just to get 19 minutes out of it. And they'll
Right.
probably hurry you out after about the
Well,
17-minute mark.
To be fair, we didn't have any regular library time when I was in high school or
in elementary school, I remember having regular library time. I don't remember how
We
long
would
it
go
was.
there once a week, maybe, for half an hour to look they would tell you. I had very bad schools when it came to library time.
Yeah.
When I was in first grade, no, I think I was in first grade. They took us to the library and said, "Everybody pick out a book." And so I went and I picked out a book. And I think I've told this story before on this podcast, but a few days later, for some reason, they thought it was appropriate to put on the PA a message for me to come to the principal's office, which of course is something that's associated with some kind of horrifying, behavior problem. When what they called me down for was because I had picked a book from the 6th grade section and not from the 1st grade section. It was a book on astronomy. And,
I've told my story in that regard too. But
yeah.
At least I think I have.
Yeah, you have. I think so. I mean, may as well retell it. We've had 90 episodes now.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing. Like, I mean, in high school it was a little better. Like, I remember being able to go to the library in high school and just pick out any book I want. We had some decent science books in our high school library.
Sure.
And sometimes I would just sit in the library and read them for a couple hours, and that was nice. But in elementary school, I had the same experience where I was reading from the shelf that had the 6th grade books, and a teacher actually came and took it out of my hand and said, this book is too advanced for you, and walked away with it. And like, it was a story. I was just reading a story.
It's just a story.
It kind of painted my outlook for what public schools were from that point on, and I wasn't wrong either.
No,
as time went on, it became obvious that this was not a place that was meant to breed intelligence.
No, it's not.
If anything, it was a place that was designed to squash any semblance of intelligence out of anyone that.
Well, yeah, that's the exact point, right? Like, it was treated as if the kinds of things that you would have had to do to get called to the principal's office as a first grader were like, probably you wouldn't get called to the principal's office if you punched someone, right? Got into a fight. You would have to set something on fire or do something that is actually against the law to get sent to the principal's office, like in a significant way. And so for them to put it, I don't even know how they managed to do it, because it's like, I just went and I was like, oh, a book on astronomy, and I got the book, and they stamped it, and I put my name on the little card, and they, all that stuff, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll bring it back in a week, and then
they fed
somehow,
that librarian to alligators.
Maybe, I mean, I hope so. But so somehow information got back to someone in an office somewhere, and they thought, let's not say hey, could you go to the library, right? It was principal's office, and I was like, what did I do, right? Oh, my crime, because you could get in trouble for speaking when the teacher was speaking. They would put your name on the board, and then you get a check or something like that. And if you got enough checks, you'd have to sit, somewhere for detention for lunch or whatever. But reading a book that's too hard for you doesn't strike me as something that goes on the list of disciplinary requiring actions.
It's even funnier than that, because you're reading a book that they think is too hard for you.
Right.
I like
and
the idea.
What's funnier about that is that they had me going into higher grade classrooms for the reading portion of the day because I was so advanced in reading at that point, right? I was in kindergarten and they were having me go read with the 2nd graders because I was just I was bored, basically. There was this one point where we all had to kind of read to the rest of the class, and I held the book up and I looked down at it and I read it upside down without slowing down, and they were like, "How can you do that? That's amazing." I'm like, not really.
It's not hard to read a book. Have you tried? Did you ever try?
Well, I mean, it was that I was reading it upside down that really surprised them.
I mean, I can read upside down just fine, and to me it is weird when people can't, but I guess I can understand that it's okay, this is just something I can do that some people can't.
Well, I mean, you might slow down a little bit, right? You might, have to get a new habit of moving your eyes in opposite directions. But like at the same time, I just remember this being pointed out and me being baffled by, like, well, I'm just, I'm not. I mean, first off, I'm reading aloud, which is already a lot slower than I would read naturally. And then, it's like, it's not like it's upside down and mirrored and, impressed on a spiral.
Right.
I'm not reading Michael Crichton's Sphere here, right? Like, it's just a book that I'm holding at my stomach and looking down at it and reading the book. And it's a kindergarten level book. It's not particularly hard. So, like the idea that the teacher was amazed was just like baffling to me.
I'm never really surprised when teachers are surprised by the most mundane of things.
That's true.
I do have a pretty hilarious image in my head now of like a librarian letting you check out the wrong book and therefore they're fed to alligators. Like it's so much like a Nazi concentration camp sometimes when you think about it. So I picture there was like one person that we were never aware of. It's like, well, you were supposed to take the child and give them a different book. Why did you let me check out this book? We are going to have a conversation about this now, aren't we? And cancelled by the Germans.
What is the title of this book? In astronomy? Does that sound like something that was written by Mercer Mayer? No, it does not. Are there anthropomorphic animals in this story? No, there are not. Clearly, this is not appropriate.
We have told you several times. The Bernstein. How is this so difficult?
It's like it boggles the mind that like somewhere there must have been like a red light that like was flashing.
Kid has wrong book. Alert. There's like someone running with dogs on a leash.
Yeah. Well, there was that Simpsons gag, right, where there was the independent thought alarm. It's like that.
Yeah.
2 independent thought alarms in one day.
Oh,
something's
man,
wrong.
I always think of the critic joke where he's standing in front of the classroom and he's like, be an independent thinker. And they all go, be an independent thinker out loud as they're writing it in their notebooks.
Right.
So, anyway, should we talk about this list more? Or
yeah, we should talk about the list more.
Yeah, let's go through this. Where did we leave off? Very quick and rapid.
Very rainy would be next.
Yeah, very rainy and pouring. Now, rainy can just be like a little heavier of a rain than a drizzle. Very rainy might be a little bit more than that. Pouring is pouring, no matter how you look at it. Pouring is not a drizzle. Pouring is not a lot of rain. Pouring is pouring. Pouring is also pouring something into a container. So
that's also a problem. Yes.
Yeah. So if we're you know what? One little exercise that we can go through here real quick.
Sure.
Instead of using very, let's try completely. Just up to where we are now. So we've got completely noisy, completely deafening, completely often, completely frequently, completely old, completely ancient. Now notice something though. Some of the things that won't take very will take completely. So like completely destitute and completely poor can both be said.
Yes.
But completely perfect is a redundancy, whereas completely flawless doesn't really... It might be a redundancy, but it works. Completely flawless can imply that we thought there might have been some flaws, but it turns out it's completely flawless.
Completely perfect could work if it was used in the
same sense that I just used.
No. Like it's used in the sense of like a contrast to an expectation, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I did with the flawless one too.
Okay. Fair enough. Completely powerful.
Yeah,
completely compelling.
Completely compelling works, but completely powerful
does not
really work that well. I'm trying to think if there's a case for completely powerful.
I can't think of one offhand.
Yeah, I can't either.
It sounds weird too.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you change the word that's accentuating, suddenly you find out that this list has some other problems with it, such as there are words on the one side that can take the accentuation, but now we have words and a lot of words on the other side do not take completely.
Right.
Yeah. So completely rainy, that doesn't make sense. Completely pouring doesn't make sense.
Right. Next up, we have very rich being wealthy. And I enjoy this one. Because
yeah,
very rich is something that can be applied to food, right? And you wouldn't call
that's
food
where you're going
wealthy.
with it. I was looking at it for
Well,
You
so I
wouldn't-
always make this joke because one of the hours that I had when I was in high school for a couple of years was Spanish, and the textbook that we had for Spanish, you said rico, right? Or rica as an adjective could mean rich or delicious, and it was a funny thing about that textbook that they used the word delicious to describe rico when it just means rich, and rich means a form of delicious under certain circumstances. And so, because part of my family is native Spanish speakers, I will often joke at them when they say rico or rica that it means delicious, because that's what was in the textbook that they handed me in high school.
Yeah, the textbooks will often give these definitions that they won't tell you if it's not a very common use. I came across
Right.
that a lot when studying Japanese, and so
Yeah.
it becomes very confusing. And I'm kind of a fan of teaching people when you teach vocabulary to people.
Would you say it was very confusing, or would you say it was mind-boggling?
I would say that I was at a loss.
Okay.
So
Very lost, or just at a loss?
just at a loss.
Okay.
I was at a mind-boggling. I was very much at a mind-boggling loss.
Extremely much. Completely much.
Yeah. It's a compelling way to describe it, I suppose.
Very
you're just
compelling?
pouring it on.
Yeah.
You're very raining it on.
Then we have one that is really bad. Very
Oh,
sad. And sorrowful.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we can say that those are very equivalent, or
They're
just
not, because I mean, very sad to define an event could mean sorrowful, but very sad to describe like a person's mental state
yeah,
is not. You wouldn't usually use the word sorrowful for that. Sorrowful is used for events, not for states of mind. Whereas if you wanted to say the person was very sad, you might say they were devastated or something like that. But you wouldn't say that the sorrowful could be used to describe how they're acting, right? The way that the way that his face was contorted was very sorrowful. But you wouldn't describe his state of mind that way.
I really can't. Yeah, I really can't think of a way that you could do that either. I mean,
surely you could find a case where it might work, but general, like the general impression that I have is that if I was writing, I wouldn't use these two things as equivalents. I would have to be very careful about what the subject and what the object are, as opposed to just like a one-for-one substitution. You got to think about these things, and X's and check marks are not a good way to get people to think about things. What did they always tell us in school in math? Show your work, right?
Right.
And this shows no work.
Now, this doesn't show any work other than there is a pen in the pictures that implies that the person used the pen to make these marks. But there's only one pen, so
right,
and
it looks like
it's
a
not
black
one of,
pen, probably.
Yeah, so it's not even like one of those multicolor pens. So where did the green and red X and check mark come from?
Some other pen.
Yeah, that's what is this pen doing here? Because the words are typed.
They are.
Well, next we have very scared and petrified. Now,
yes.
There's a decent case that you can say, very scared and petrified can kind of be an equivalency, but petrified, of course, also has the meaning of a petrified forest. And again, we're being facetious, but it's just important to point that out. You wouldn't want to again run a Control F over all of this and replace all the words. Scared and petrified usually are used in different senses. Very
scared is lower on the sliding scale than petrified. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
all that petrified is really saying is petrified is the sense of the word.
Petrified implies that a person is so afraid that they are paralyzed with fear. Yes, right.
Yeah, and it's used in the same sense. That's why you use the word
petrified.
Yeah, it's used in the same sense as a petrified forest. It's what the word means.
It's used in a metaphorical sense of petrified forest.
So it does have an extreme...
But you could be terrified, or you
yeah.
could be, screaming in fear, or you could be right there. There's all kinds of things that you could do to express being very scared without being petrified.
Right.
You could be cowering. You could be shaking, shivering. You could you could soil yourself.
Yeah.
We have a lot of options here.
Yeah, so that was one that was open to a lot of interpretation.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario is that someone looks at this list and they never think that there's another word that they could use to replace these terms other than the ones
Right.
they've been given. And
Right.
that's probably the majority of people that have books published on Amazon, unfortunately. So
Yeah, either that or AI.
yeah, or AI. Well, now, I mean, the past 5 years, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And they do have a checkmark thing when you publish on Amazon that you're supposed to click if you're publishing with AI. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that just don't. So it's not like that.
I mean, that thing doesn't actually. That's not front facing. That's not customer facing.
Yeah.
It only tells Amazon how many things are being published that are made with AI or not AI. And so if I go looking for like freelance work, there's a ton of people that are writing like 5 to 6 crappy science fiction books per month, like using AI, and like they want someone who is going to take an 80,000 word AI produced, who's going to create a prompt that tells an AI to create an 80,000 to 100,000 word science fiction novel from a single prompt, and then they want people to humanize the results of that AI gobbledygook.
Which should tell a lot of people just how limited AI still is, and probably will be for a very long time.
Making a long and consistent story is requires a lot more, say, internal memory of what you're doing than most AI is designed to produce or to exhibit. AI can be used to answer a simple question very well. And as long as you check to make sure it isn't hallucinating, which you should always do, you can sometimes get useful answers that provide you with context that you couldn't have guessed at. I had to do this once where there was a book I was reading, and the book referred without citation to the great historian Justin. I shit you not.
I am known for my histories.
And I was like, okay, I know a Justin, but I'm pretty sure that's not who this is talking about. And so I went to an AI and I said, hey, I'm reading this old book, and it refers to an author of historical, records that is called Justin by English speakers. And it's like, oh, you're talking about Justinius blah, 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 who wrote this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, that appears to be correct. Thank you. I would not have known... it's possible that a simple Google search would have said, historian Justin would have gotten me somewhere, but it could have also provided me with a lot of, like, modern historians whose first names are Justin.
Yeah.
And so, like, being able to add the context that it's a historian that was referred to in a book that was written in the 1700s kind of kicks all those people out of the possibility. So, it's one of those things where actually was useful. And then there was cases where I was like, hey, can you tell me where this quote was in this particular body of writings? And it will hallucinate a letter. And I'll be like, oh yeah, Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to so-and-so on December 17th of 17 blah, 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 blah. And in it he said blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that letter doesn't appear to exist. And it's like, you're right, that letter doesn't exist.
Yeah, that was my favorite story that you told me about that, where it was just like, yeah, the AI told me that it made it up, but it didn't tell me that until after I questioned it about it.
I had to ask it again, yeah.
Yeah, so, it would be a useful tool if it was reliable in that sense.
It can be a useful tool if you check it, and if you use it with care and caution, just in the same way that this list could be used with care and caution. But the list is not formatted in such a way as to promote you to use it with care and caution. It's promoted to say, oh, this is a red X, mean bad, and this is a green check, mean good. And so I just transfer.
Right.
Lists like this are just designed to give people excuses to not think about what the hell they're doing. And when you don't think about what the hell you're doing, you get bad results.
Yeah. Well, we're only halfway through the list, so let's jump through some of them. We've got very serious and grave. Now, this can work. Serious and
Yeah,
grave can work. You don't need the
serious
very.
and grave can work. I mean, grave is. I would say that grave is usually a little more important than serious. On that
Yeah.
sliding scale. You can have a serious wound and you can have a grave wound, and those mean two different things.
Well, think about that. Think about that, though. So, very serious and grave
Yeah.
might mean the same thing, whereas might be about the same on the scale, whereas serious and
Sure.
grave might not. So, what's really happening here is that grave is not necessarily a better term to use than very serious. It has merely absorbed the very. Like imagine if you
Yeah.
mushed very and serious
Well,
together,
but
it would turn into the
that's something
word
that you
grave.
do want to do sometimes, right?
Yeah.
If you can use one specific, pinpointed word as opposed to a regular generic word and an accentuator, that can be something that can definitely improve the perception of your writing by readers, right? And this is why people make that stupid, no adverbs thing, right? Because often,
Very often.
maybe even very often,
Frequently even.
you'll discover that if you take an adverb and the verb that you attach it with, there is often a single word that means, those two words put together, right? Instead of he said loudly, you could say shouted or yelled or something like that, right? This is something that you do want to think about, but it's also not something that you want to just do without thinking about it, because you could end up painting yourself into very strange corners.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily want to imply that you can't use some of these words.
Well, we have implied that
Yeah.
deafening, like if it said green checkmark, deafening, semicolon, cacophonous, right? That
Yeah.
would take the two meanings, the two most common meanings of very noisy, and separate them in a way that you could say, oh, is this deafening, or is it simply confusing, right? Because
Right.
cacophony doesn't have to be loud, but it is noisy in the sense that it hinders your ability to interpret what's going on around you because there's so much disjointed input coming in, right?
Yep.
Which, that input doesn't have to have high amplitude. It just has to overrule whatever you're trying to listen to, or confuse it so much that you can't tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
This
this list is rather cacophonous.
it
ways.
is in a metaphorical sense.
So we have very sharp and keen,
Yeah,
like my keen knife blade that I.
or even a keen argument,
Yeah.
or a keen student. Those are things that work.
Which is very funny because you could also say cutting for argument. So a sharp argument can be a cutting argument.
Yes, or an insult.
Yeah.
We're getting into ad hominem here.
We're adding all
this
the
list
homonyms.
is very stupid or moronic.
Oh, we have very short or brief. I haven't met a lot of brief
shiny.
people. Did I?
You missed shiny.
Very shiny and gleaming.
Yeah.
I kind of want to just say shiniferous sometimes, which this is one of those ways that you can play around with words in your stories. People will know what you mean.
Too, is that shiny is an innate
trait
property of an object, and gleaming means that light is reflecting off of that object.
Yeah.
A mirror in the dark is still shiny, but it isn't gleaming, if that makes sense.
It does.
I think that makes sense.
It's not the same way I was going to describe it, but yeah, pointing out that it still exists as something that's shiny, even when it's dark, is a good way to make that example.
Yeah, because the surface, shiny is a quality of the surface of an object, and gleaming means that light is reflecting off of it right now.
Yeah. All right, so then we come to very short and brief. So
yeah.
And I don't want to insult any of my brief friends out there, but this can cause some confusion when you're referring to the stature of a person.
Sure.
I have, in my head, I was considering people that were shorter than me brief for a while after seeing this list. It's like, oh, it's one of them brief people.
Yeah.
New slur just dropped, guys. We're canceled. We're canceled by the short people now. The brief people now.
The brief people. The briefers.
You'll like her, especially if you're into brief girls.
Uh-oh.
Very shy and timid. Now,
Those are not the same thing at all.
yeah. Timidity doesn't necessarily imply any shyness at all. It might
Correct.
It might imply mere
Timidity is a lack of courage,
yeah,
not a lack of
Mere-
vivaciousness.
a mere lack of impetus to take action on something. That doesn't necessarily mean shy.
Sure. Yeah.
There are lots of boisterous.
No, timid can be indecisiveness, I guess is what you're trying to say. Yeah, right. And shyness is not indecisiveness.
Well, there can be
Shyness is an
boisterous. There can be boisterous cowards, but most of the
yeah.
time, shy people aren't going to be particularly boisterous.
Correct. We have very simple and basic.
Yeah, basic is a coding language, so you can't really replace very simple with basic unless you do like a print F and have very simple in the quotation.
I guess.
And I think that's the most facetious one I've got on the list there.
I mean, I'm gonna print a new book, The Very Simple Guide to Basic.
Yeah.
and that should be a bestseller.
But I'm going to print the very basic guide, the basic guide to very simple, and we're going to compete.
Yeah. Next up, we have very slow as sluggish.
Well, no, hang on, just real quick.
Okay, hang on.
Simple is usually a matter of like the complication of something, whereas basic can mean something in its most broken down form.
Simple means not complex, but basic means rudimentary.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. So next we have very slow and sluggish.
Yes.
Not a bad comparison, but sluggish also has other implications that slow might
sluggish
not.
Sluggish is speed, and slow is, well, I mean, it's another case where I think that slow can apply to multiple different dimensions or units, right? Like slow can apply to a person as well. Like this person is very unintelligent.
Imagine the image that you have in your head too, though. Like if you say that a person moves slowly, you have one image. But if you say they're moving sluggishly, you have more of like, oh, this person just woke up.
That's a really good point, right? Like because you can move slowly for the sake of precision, but that's not the same thing as moving sluggishly.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, good point.
So again, and I don't even feel like that one's facetious. I think anyone could have looked at that one and been like, yeah, there's some obvious reasons I might not want to replace very slow with slow. Like,
I mean, there's some very clear reasons why you wouldn't want to make that switch. Which brings us to our next entry.
Very clear and obvious.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways you can go with this one. I mean, you can have a lake that is very clear. The water is very clear.
An obvious lake obvious.
Yeah, lake obvious, but the water is not obvious. I mean, it's obvious that there's water there, maybe, but you can't.
Well, no, if the lake was very clear, it wouldn't be obvious.
Oh, well, I mean, if it's clear enough, it wouldn't be obvious.
Well, very clear would be clear enough.
No. Very clear just implies that it has a greater extent of clarity.
What about
but
completely clear?
Completely clear, yes. A completely clear lake might not be obvious.
Right. It would just look like a hole.
Yeah, so at this point, we're kind of just having fun with the way we're using these words. And these are the things that, these are the mental exercises you give yourself as a writer to be a better writer. Know the meanings of words. Yeah,
This is something that a reader can do to think about, like, ooh, that's funny, or that would be an interesting way to phrase that, or this is what this author means, right? Because you can use a lot of these adjectives in like metaphorical ways as well, and so like the reader might have to like interpret things that are a little bit non-obvious, not very clear, or they might be clear but not obvious.
Yeah, and maybe they have. Oh, wait, we haven't jumped ahead to very clean and spotless yet, have we?
No, we have not.
Yeah, so you can have very clean writing in the sense that it reads fluidly and...
Or a very clean cut.
Yeah. But you might not have a spotless bit of writing or a spotless cut of writing.
But you could have a flawless cut.
You could, but then that's open to subjective analysis, so maybe not.
True.
You can interpret it as a flawless cut, but you might just have something that is relatively clean, not even very clean. But very clean and spotless are, again, two different things, where spotless has a direct implication on an existing state, whereas very clean and even clean and very
He's on a
clean
sliding scale.
are on a
Yeah.
sliding scale. Very angry and furious. That's not too bad of one. There's
Well, so no. This is actually a pretty bad one, I think, because a person can be very angry without having any fury, right?
yeah,
A person can be very quietly angry. And
Yeah,
that person is not furious because they're not exhibiting any fury, which is the root word for furious.
I think it's more a matter of sliding scales in this case because let's step back for this one.
Well, no, I mean like an opera, an opera
furious opera?
protagonist might be very angry, but would not be furious.
Well, it depends on
It depends on the opera, but
it depends on what the beat is too, because you can have a furious beat.
Yeah.
There is that use of furious as well. You wouldn't want to exchange that with a very angry beat.
Mm-hmm.
There is also, if we just step back and look at replacing the terminology, you're using furious in terms of anger, and you've
Mhm.
written very angry. If you say he was very angry with her, you
Mhm.
don't necessarily get the same level of rage in your imagination as saying he was furious with her.
Yeah, sure.
So again, we have, even using very, I would say that if you use the term very angry, you're getting less of an amount of anger than in your imagination than you would if you described someone as being furious.
Well, like, you can be very angry and you can seethe, but if you're
Yeah.
seething, you're not furious. That's my point.
Yeah, there's that too. No, I get the first point you were making, but I'm saying if we kind of just step back and look at actually trying to replace these words
Yeah.
in the sentences in this case, you don't necessarily have a direct comparison again.
Yeah.
Same with, well, very funny and hilarious is a bit of a tricky one because there's not too many. There's like different uses of funny, of course. Like
Sure.
saying you thought he was a very funny person can imply two different things,
Right.
and saying that he
Hilarious
was
or eccentric.
saying he was a hilarious person only implies the one.
Correct.
But if you were using it in terms of someone being funny, again, I would say that hilarious might seem a little funnier than just very funny. So that's not a bad replacement. It's not like everything on this list is, a bad replacement. It's just a matter of you should think about it when you use it. Don't just
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that in your mind there is a difference in the sliding scale between something you would call very funny and something you would call hilarious. And so therefore, if I say something is very funny and then I say something else is hilarious, the hilarious thing is more funny than the very funny thing.
Right. And
Okay.
it's actually a bit better when you look at it in terms of saying very funny, because you can also say completely hilarious, and
Yes.
that would almost certainly evoke an image of something being much funnier than something that was very funny.
Yeah.
So we got two left here. We've got very easy and effortless.
Correct.
Again, this is not an equivalency by any stretch. Very easy can imply a lot less effort. Effortless is often used
without effort.
Yeah, and it's often used to exaggerate just how easy something is on
Sure.
the sliding scale of very easy. Like, it might be very easy for me to move this coffee on my desk, but if I had a button that would just flip it over, that is an practically effortless, and I could just outright say it was an effortless motion for me to hit that button and watch my coffee fly off into the stratosphere.
So our last entry is very big, and the substitute for it that's given is massive,
This might be the best one.
or the worst one.
Well, best in terms of our amusement, worst in terms of...
Sure. It's incredibly amusing.
Yeah, so I'll let you take this one because you got me to have a good chuckle about it the first time. So
Well, very big is descriptive of size, and massive is descriptive of weight. Is the simplest way to put that, right? Like a thing that is big could not be massive. Like a kilogram of feathers is very big, but it isn't very massive, or it isn't massive at all, or it's massive, but massive in the physics sense, where something that has any mass at all is technically massive. An electron is massive, a photon is not massive. But a photon can be very big, because it might be very low in frequency, and therefore very large in wavelength. It's, these two don't match at all, and it's kind of sad that they don't match. I think I'm forgetting the joke that I got you to chuckle with before.
No. I mean, it was essentially that the way you mentioned that first part of it about, like, okay, so like there's a use case here.
Yeah.
A massive. You used feathers as an example. Now, what you can do with the word massive is you can say a massive amount of feathers, because you have restricted the set of things to just feathers, and therefore, if you have many of them, you can say that you have a combined heavier weight that is massive.
Yeah.
You can use the term in the sense of describing something as big, but it's often used the way you described it. I think it's mistakenly used a lot of times in terms of just this thing is very big. Like gargantuan is a better word for that. Or monolithic.
Gargantuan means very big. Gargantuan is a size.
Yeah.
And big is a size. Massive is a weight or a mass. And so very heavy could be massive. That would be a pretty good substitution, but very big to massive is just not a good match at all.
And the use case, again, it comes from a common usage of massive has been big for a very long time. So outside of the scientific circle, I don't think you're going to see much complaint with people using massive instead of things for big.
Well,
but it's important to point this out.
Like you could say a massive amount of something, but you wouldn't say a massive bag of. I mean, I guess maybe you could.
Well, you could say the statue was massive, and of course, since it's so big, there is also an implication that it has a lot of weight.
It's big, but it's also made out of a solid metal or something like that.
Or stone. Yeah.
But like you could have a very big balloon, and you could probably get away with calling it a massive balloon, but at the same time, if it's floating away, there's probably better words for you to use. Gigantic, gargantuan, huge.
Enormous.
Yeah.
Sky blotting.
Yeah, right. Something like that. But yeah, it's not a particularly good match. That match is not very perfect.
Yeah, there's a massive flaw in it.
Yes.
That's heavy, man.
And it's very easy to see that.
You could say it's effortless. And you could also say that we are not very funny, nor are we hilarious.
No, that's correct. And if you've been listening to this, you might be very angry or you might be furious. And if you feel like either of those, feel free to leave a comment.
But keep it very clean. Not necessarily spotless.
Sure.
And we get emailed about those, so it will be obvious, and it will be very clear that you are angry with us.
And it's okay if it's very sharp or keen.
Yeah. Or if it takes us forever to finish this episode because we're being very slow about it.
We won't be sorrowful.
Yeah. I mean, these are all basic ideas, very simple things to work with.
Sure.
No reason to be timid about discussing it.
Or petrified.
Yeah, we tried to keep it brief, but that just didn't work out. We might be running very short on time now.
Yeah, we thought that this would be a very quick episode, but it turns out to not be so rapid.
We tried to give a few gleaming examples. I don't know. I think that's.
I think this joke is becoming ancient.
Yeah, yeah. It's not very compelling anymore.
And excruciating.
And quite frankly, I am kind of destitute with my puns here at this point.
That's fair.
Frequently, we would end right about this time. What do you think? Is it getting old?
I think that the silence is deafening.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, that will do it for this week. Thanks everybody for listening in. Hope this was helpful for people who are either trying to analyze the stuff they're reading, or people who are trying to write their own stuff to begin with. Don't just take a list, even if it's from someone who is an authority. Don't just take a list and do things with it without thinking about it. Always think about it.
So we like to think that we push people to think a little more. That's really the goal here. It's not to necessarily tear apart everything on this list just for a laugh. It's to point out that yeah, there's a list here, fine, and the idea behind it isn't a bad idea, but think about
Right.
what it means. Don't just take it for granted.
Right, and it's very easy to do that with... This is a very simple example, in the sense that most people will probably look at this and say, I get it, you're not supposed to just do this one for one necessarily, but as advice gets more complex, it also becomes more subtle.
Yeah.
So, keep that in mind when someone hands you an answer to a question that might not consider all of the contingencies that you might be worried about. Anyway, let's call this an episode. As always, I am Rudy.
And I am Justin.
Not the historian.
I am
And
not
yeah,
Justinian,
we will.
no.
No, I'm not even sure that it's Justinian. But anyway, wordy pair as usual. See you next week. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.